So there. Hopefully. Nope. How about here? There's never a good place for this. It's liable to fall.
No, it's very comfortable.
I'll put it here. I'll put it here. Only thing is, it needs to be close enough where it doesn't pick up the sound. Especially if, like, someone in the back of the room says something, they won't hear it unless you speak loud enough. So hopefully that was helpful. And I plan on doing the same thing again tonight so that for all the folks that aren't here, I have an overall summary. Yes?
This was helpful to me because, just to be honest, sometimes when you were showing the videos, I had no idea why you were showing the videos. It didn't make sense to me.
And sometimes I couldn't hear it either, like when you're playing on the projector. So it's cool to go back and watch them.
And
So I hear.
yeah, just to be able to go back and watch
Why
it.
did I-
I was like, oh, that's why he was showing the Doritos commercial. It didn't really make sense.
Was there a good reason for why I should? I just like it.
I can't. That one just stuck out in my head for some reason.
Plus,
But
it's the visual you remember it, you know. Once
Yeah.
you see it, you know, as her eyes light up, and they don't actually show the fetus zooming out, but that's understood.
But I didn't really get the correlation between why we were watching the videos and the course. I was a little confused.
There might not actually be reasons.
There
I
were
might
though
be
when
just
you
having a good time.
when you listed them out. There were reasons to them, and it made more sense.
Well, something I said at one point when we were looking at some exercises, and we were discussing whether or not the one exercise, the one example was a argument or if it was an explanation. And at that point, I said, well, you know, we're just making this up. And everyone laughed. But the thing is, that's actually true. And the point of that was that it's not really possible to determine just looking at the written exercise, because it's important what the speaker was trying to do. And we don't have a real speaker speaking those different exercises. And as a result, we can't tell if he meant it as an argument or if he meant it as an explanation. And it's your intonation, the way you deliver those kinds of things, that tells us whether it's an argument or not. I remember once, and I don't think I mentioned this, but it was really intriguing. We had a group of students on a East Coast tour one summer, and one of our stops was at a Shakespeare theater in Staunton, Virginia. I don't know if you're familiar with the town. And the one afternoon, I and the 4 students that were with us went to the theater to a seminar with some of the actors at the Shakespeare theater. And what they did as an exercise is they gave each of us a line from one of Shakespeare's plays. And then they told us, okay, deliver this line to mean this. And they gave us a word, you know, that we're angry or something, right? And we would read the line demonstrating that we're angry. And then they gave us a different word to express with the same line. And we each delivered the line now meaning something else. And then again, and they just kept doing this for like 10, 15 times until it was driven into our head that we could say each of those lines in such a way that it meant anything we wanted. And it was absolutely startling, because you think, well, wait a minute, Shakespeare must have meant something when he said this, right? You know, so how can you use his words to mean anything, basically? You know, you're angry, you're trying to be attractive, you're trying to insult. I mean, just You pick it, right? And it's amazing that you can actually do this. And then they pointed out that that's why the director is so important in the play, because the director is the one that has the overall message of the play, and so wants everyone to head towards that particular message. So he wants you to emphasize and present the line in a certain way, right? To be or not to be, you gotta be kidding me. It can be used any way, that you practically want, right? So text is absolutely difficult to interpret, right? And what you're really dependent on is the culture or the tradition of the correct interpretation of the text, which, by the way, of course, comes into a lot of criticisms of all sorts, especially if you can imagine the Bible. When you're reading something from the Bible and it's translated first off, and you're trying to figure out, because most, I would think, Americans are going to read something in English rather than going to the Greek. And can you trust the Greek? Did Jesus speak Greek? That's all sorts of questions over that. And then there were arguments among the Greek translators. Should we accept the Septuagint, the translation into Greek of the Old Testament by the 70? Should we trust that? Well, we're so used. I mean, there's arguments. There's letters, for example, between St. Augustine and St. Jerome, who was the one who famously translated the Hebrew Old Testament and the Greek New Testament into Latin, which was the Latin Vulgate for, I'm not sure how, still, if you're reading the Latin text, which, by the way, you can, if you go to the library, the Luzak Library, and you go to the second floor to the Stevens Room, if it's open, one of the books that's there is a facsimile of the Gutenberg Bible, which, that was the very first printed text in at least the Western culture. You might say that there were some printed books in India or in China. But in any case, you could go, and it's there, and it's a 2-volume work, and it's in Latin. So it's the Bible in Latin. So if you want, you could go and read Latin. Or you might. That's on the internet, of course, too. But so first you have to get through the hump of all of the various translations that were involved, plus wondering who actually said it, etc. But then you have to interpret it. What's going on here? One of my favorites is let's see which one. There's like 3 that are especially funny. But say Jesus is arguing with rabbis, right? And one of the rabbis says to him, "Master, is it right for us to give Caesar the tax? Do we have to pay the tax?" Right? Obviously, I'm not quoting exactly, right? Is it right to pay the tax? And this was a neat test, because, of course, everyone listening to Jesus would be furious if he said, yes, we should pay the tax. Right? But at the same time, if he says, no, you shouldn't pay the tax, that's an arrestable offense. Right? So this is, he's caught, right? But famously, Jesus says to the rabbi, show me the coin of tribute, right? Remember? Yes? No, maybe not. Okay. This is, Jesus, he's kind of famous. You don't know. But in any case, he says, show me the coin of tribute. And the rabbi shows him a coin, right? Which means he's got one of these on his person. And by the way, then Jesus says, whose image is on it, right? And it's Caesar, right? Which, by the way, if you were a rabbi, you broke the law because you're not allowed to carry icons, right? And he's got the icon of Caesar, which is a god, by the way. in the Roman pantheon, right? And so here, here's the coin, and Jesus takes the coin. And then he says what?
Let me save you from yourself. I'll take these, all of these.
One interpretation, right? Well, more specifically, he says, give to Caesar those things that are Caesar's, or what is Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's, right? But we don't have any stage directions. What happens next, right? And the Jewish interpretation of this scene is, this is a typical Jewish ploy, right? Show me the coin. Jesus keeps the coin, right? He doesn't give it back, right? And the rabbi's stuck. He's out of coin, right? Right? Because he can't get it back now. He's just giving it to him, right? And what does Jesus mean by that? Well, it could be interpreted that what he's saying is, God gets everything. Give to Caesar what's Caesar's. But even the coin ends up going in Jesus' pouch or whatever. He didn't have a pocket, right? They didn't make pockets, as far as I know, right? But is that what actually happened? Is that what you would hear the bishop saying? No, actually, the bishops use that usually to point out you have to pay the tax. Because by the time the church is in charge of things, it's supporting the state, right? So the tradition for the church is to encourage that to be interpreted to mean that Jesus was encouraging you to support the state by paying the tax, because that's Caesar's. But how do you interpret what's actually in the text, right? And that's just one funny example, right? By the way, there are folks that argue that these are terrific explanations of why Jesus was so popular, because that was absolutely hilarious. He got out of the trap, right? And it's absolutely hilarious, because now the rabbi that tried to trap him is out a coin and hasn't succeeded in trapping Jesus. But that's just one of my favorites, right? But you can do that with anything anybody says, as far as I know, right? So that adds difficulty to the whole process of analyzing an argument. What did was it intended as an argument, or was he just explaining things? Which, by the way, is why the first test, notice, and let me go, I'll get out of that. Let me go to the first test. Which is due next, is that right?
2 weeks.
That's one chapter. Due by midnight, right? So that's June 17th. So yeah, that's 2 weeks. So it's not right now, but actually, at least a couple of you have already sent me your test one, because these questions are the kind of questions you can answer without even having come to the class, right? You pick the music for a friend's wedding, right? Well, we haven't even discussed why music is, number one, is it logical, you think? Music? Nah?
It's more subjective.
Here's one of my favorites.
It depends on what kind of music, I think. I just finished up music appreciation, and it was composers from Middle Ages to present, just all composers, and a lot of their stuff was really logical, just in the way that they formed it and built it, like just different pieces. It all used to be so just perfectly connected versus the common music that we hear now.
Okay, so here's a clip from the movie Amadeus.
Well, may I have for me today? Interesting. Yes, about it. Well, there it is. Good.
Your Majesty, I hope you won't find it improper, but I've written a little mark
mention about his own.
See
What a
what's,
charming idea.
I'm going to turn this off, because I don't want